Welcome to the Books Applied podcast, presented by WSL Leadership. In this podcast, we talk about an awesome book and how to apply it to your work, sport, or life. I'm your host, Iggy Perillo. Thanks for joining me. On this episode, we are going to be talking about the book Stealing Fire by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheal. And joining me today for this podcast, I'm talking with the amazing Gail Kraft. Gail, tell us a little bit about what you do and also how this book connected to you, because you brought this book to me, so you are the reason we're talking about this book today.
Oh, thank you so much, Iggy. So where to begin? So I am an empowerment master, what does that mean in layman's terms? I am more than a coach. I am about the mind-body connection and very much on the spiritual side of personal development. And the book Stealing Fire was recommended to me by a friend. And my first thought was, oh, here we go. Another motivational book. But it was recommended to me. So I absolutely got the book. And I was so pleasantly surprised, and it blew me away because it was very much speaking to how I have run my life, why I was successful as a manager, because I just followed my intuition. I was always in flow, always in the zone. And whenever I make a choice or a decision out of that flow, it always is wrong. So reading this put validation to my entire life in how I work with clients. So I was thrilled to read it. And as a result, I have a keynote called Crafting the Flow Formula. And I am in the middle of writing the book, Crafting the Flow Formula, because this is news and it's not news. This is information that needs to be pushed out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So and you recommended this book to me. Yeah. And that's great. And I am a fan of flow. I think we do similar work with people and groups of people. And so finding this flow, not just for yourself, but within a group / organization team, whatever kind of scale you mean a group of people, is fascinating to me. And so when you first recommended this to me, that's funny that you had reservations at first, because I had reservations. I'm like, is this going to be some Silicon Valley bro microdosing book? And no, it is not. And a part of it, yes. Like, that's one piece. There's more to it than that. And I think there's a little bit wider range. I don't know if you've read, what is it called? Michael Pollan's book about how to change your mind, which is really about psilocybin and the external drugs you can take to get to this ecstatic state. And so this book, like, he covers sort of more of the science and that side of things, but this book covers that, but also talks about what this state is that you're getting to, like what this flow means, and defines basically terms that had not crossed my world before around ecstasis and what that is and how that operates, and that's not just like, good luck, go do some mushrooms. There's more to it. There is more to, and more ways, more pathways to access that state too. And it was fascinating. The part that hooked me at the beginning, that I was like, okay, I'll stick with this book, was when they talked about the Navy SEALs. Like, that was their first example, and how the Navy SEALs is super exclusive. Like, so much money, so much training, so much effort, so like few people can get accepted into this program. And so they want people who can get into a flow with a team super easily. Like, they need to work together and be, people call it like the hive mind, the, shared brain. Like, there's all this sort of terms for the state where they're really working together seamlessly, but all doing different things all at the same time, but all on mission. And the Navy SEALs, huge, obviously, research backing to their world, they select for people who can easily do this, but they can't figure out how to train it, which I thought was great. I'm like, oh, I see. It's not something you can train, but is it? So yeah, that part in the beginning, I'm like, okay, I'll stick with it.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I wrote the book, Crafting the Flow Formula, and that's my keynote, because what it is, it requires discipline, right? And it is not just one process. When we talk about personal development, I talk about the mind, body, and soul. And so there is a formula, there's a process that you can go through that will get you into flow. There is a process for a team. As a leader, my teams were frequently in flow. And why? Because we would play before we worked.
Absolutely. And we've talked about this a little bit before, like the power of play. Like what play means is not, I think people are like, oh, play isn't serious. It's not work. It's not blah, blah, blah. But way back to, Socratic times, like Socrates talked about like play. I think Plato actually talked about play being a way to engage with the world without structure and without expectation, that it's opening and expansive. And engagement, we're at full engagement during this open and expansive interactive state. And you can't easily replicate that by reading a book. You can't read yourself into that open, expansive state, or you can't replicate that by, just thinking like, okay, I'm going to replicate that in my mind necessarily. Like maybe you can. I think there's meditative ways to access this state, but it is interactive fundamentally. And I think that's why it's hard to quantify, like what those interactions are like.
And what's really, really interesting, when I do my keynote, I talk about, I worked from a motivational speaker. And one day she came out to the team and she says, I have to get you guys into flow. And my thought when she said that was, well, that's not going to work.
I'm going to force you into it.
Right? You cannot get right. We're going. Right. So that is why play, trust, play, respect, and knowing each other's boundaries and working within those boundaries are so, so important for the team dynamics. One of the other stories I share is I had a team in this company and they were responsible for being the creative thinkers, right? So we would once a month go into a conference room, have lunch, and play Pictionary. And we got silly, we got dirty, we just tears, laughing so hard. And then when we were done, we would sit around the conference table and I would put the recorder on because ideas would come so fast, I couldn't document them. It was so exciting. And we came up with some out of the box thinking for this organization.
I feel like I've definitely been in that state where suddenly I'm full of ideas. Suddenly I'm have so many different creative outlets and so many different evolutionary pieces and ways I'm going to push things forward, whatever it is. I've felt that. I think a lot of people have felt that, but it's fleeting and it doesn't happen very often. And this book, Stealing Fire, is really about what that fleeting feeling is, if it is fleeting for you, but also how to cultivate more of it in sort of through different channels. And I love that they talk about this sense of being immersed. Like there's sort of a very immersive aspect to it. And I was like, oh yeah, I do like some of these.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of Meow Wolf. I don't know is that Meow Wolf, those spaces, is that familiar to you? It's an art space. No. It's an immersive art space. And there's two of them. There's three of them now. There's one in Santa Fe. The original is Santa Fe, New Mexico. Then they opened one in Las Vegas because why not? And then one in Denver. And they're about to open one in Texas. But basically, this big immersive space that you walk into and you're in a whole different world. Like every piece of it is art and curated and sound and light and design. And there's maybe a plot line in a story, or maybe you just wander around and explore. Like it's super open, but you are literally immersed into a different world. And they sort of have different themes, blah, 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 whatever. But I'm like, oh yeah, I love these because it's not like anything else I've ever experienced. And it's intentional, right? There's some intent around creating something novel, something new, and something that you can engage in. I think similarly to like playing Pictionary at work, like you're in that level of engagement and focus is very real for people. And suddenly you're free from all these confines of like, what do I even expect to see around this corner? What do I expect? Like what are the limits to the ideas we can have? Like there's a certain openness that's definitely a part of it.
Right. right. And that is one of the things I've cultivated with all of my teams is the belief, the trust. So here's where the trust comes in, that whatever idea or problem you bring to me is not judged. It is open, right? And let's take it and get curious. And it's like for the first time looking at a vase, hold it up, turn it upside down. What happens if you right, invert it? Oh, look at the water falls out, right? You don't know. So I don't close the door. I leave it open to what if, right? And I've run my life that way. And it's really so freeing. And I look at things so differently because of that. And to find this book that scientifically proves that I'm not wacko, it was awesome.
Right, right. There is a lot of science behind this and tradition too. And I think that's the beautiful part when you talked about mind, body, and soul both. There are like ecstatic traditions and usually somehow in the US, we're like, oh, that's a religion, whatever. Like we sort of make this wall and like, well, that's just the woo religion side. But the reality is how your mind is operating in these different spaces and like globally, like there's global, it's not just like, oh yeah, that little cult over there. Like all around the world, there are branches of what I think the people in the US would say a religion that have ecstatic purpose. And there's a couple pieces to ecstasis I just want to make sure we have in here because it was interesting. I'm like, well, what does this mean? Like, well, we feel it, but what are we talking about? Like, I don't know. And the authors there's 4 pieces. So one is selflessness. So it's not about you. It's about, what's going on around you. Timelessness. So it's not about now. And there's this sort of difference between the incremental day to day, but then expansive ideas of time. Effortlessness, like, which is funny because they're like caveat is like, don't be a bliss junkie, like enjoy the state, but do the work both. Like, so don't just lose it there. Richness, which is not about diving too deep. It's about being like conscious and open to things, but then coming back and doing, being engaged with the reality around us. And so those 4 parts, selfless, timeless, effortless, and richness are the sort of pieces, the hallmarks of this ecstasis or this ecstatic state that they're talking about, which I thought was like, oh, yeah, like I've felt those different pieces at different times.
Yeah. It's, oh my God, it's just when you start intentionally, consciously getting into that state, you start doing things really differently. So for example, so I'm an entrepreneur now, so I don't have a team. I have me and maybe once in a while, some extended folks. And I belong to this major mastermind group. And they're about do the work. And I'm like, let it flow. Right?
Yeah.
And yes, I do the work. So here I am. So here we are, what? It's still January, not yet February when we're recording this, right? And I posted in the mastermind group, okay, so I'm the one with flow. Out of all you guys do the work, I'm like flow. I have this quarter 2 books coming out that I'm part of the anthology. So I've got chapters in 2 books coming out this quarter. I have a book that I am halfway through, and I have 4 mini books that I'm ready to work with a publisher to get out. Just this quarter. And have I done the work? Yes. But have I done the work? No.
Oh yeah, the grind. No. I'm not into the grind.
I've done it in flow. And no, it doesn't get you further. It makes it, it's like trying to walk through quicksand versus getting in the canoe and floating down the stream.
Absolutely. I work with a lot of athletes, and there's this like very clear moment where they're working together and things are flowing. And it's very obvious when you're trying too hard and you're too in your head and you're too focused on like sometimes it's like the minutia and the details and like, oh wait, how is my elbow position during the, like whatever it is for the sport you're engaging in, and your performance is terrible. Like you don't do well. You don't like actually participate smoothly in your sport. You're physically, that's the word I'm going for. Physically, your body isn't moving through the space in a way that's the most efficient and most effective because you're thinking too hard about it. And so I feel like that's part of what you're saying about flow and what this book is saying too. If you think too hard about it and force it and grind it, bring that intensity to it, you're really just going to be spending your energy in this like forcing state of things versus the state where flow actually lets the ideas come out of you more easily. And ideas versus sport, it's the same thing. Like the motion, there's more motion, there's more happening, there's more results that come from that open flow state.
Yes. So there's another book that I read, and it talks about the infinite mission statement. And what's interesting with the infinite perspective is you take the broad stroke, right? And an infinite mission statement can never be achieved. It is altruistic, but it is a deep desire. And that is my North Star. So when people say, well, what's your goal? Well, I don't have a goal. I have a mission, right? And so what activity am I engaged in? And does this support my mission? Yes. Beautiful. No, not doing it.
Right.
Not that difficult.
Yeah. I think that's this beautiful metaphor between the grind culture and the like open and the process, like engaging in journey, process, whatever it is, versus destination, goal, checklist, and not to say there's not a value in having a checklist and structure and whatever. Both you can have structure, both you can have intention, both you can have beautiful, amazing outcomes, but you don't need to approach it in a way that is, I feel like soul crushing, to be like that intense and focused and like aggravating yourself to achieve a goal and motivating yourself and a lot of it comes with like beating yourself down, tearing yourself down to build yourself up. Like this whole mentality is like self-violence in a certain way, which is not very flow oriented. It's not like versus being in this destructive, like attack mode. I think flow gets you there.
It's mental, emotional, and psychological abuse. Whether you do it to yourself or if you have a leader that does it to you and you allow it to happen, it is your right soul crushing. And for me, because I've worked there, I will 100% fail because I am dying inside.
You're not alone. I think there are so many people who just grit their teeth and gut it out at work or doing the work or whatever they call it. And I think we both have this privilege of being in an entrepreneurial space where we're like, that's not how I'm going to run my business / my life. Like, that's not okay with me anymore. That's not how I want to be. And I've worked for some very mission-driven organizations. I've spent a lot of time in nonprofit world, which is like the mission. And also that can be a grind. Like it's not to say that capitalism is crushing America or nonprofits are, saving the day, because both can be equally grind, detrimental, soul crushing type of work. And I think to say we have a mission, so in the meantime, we're going to treat you like garbage, it doesn't fare well. People don't fare well in that environment. Similarly, they don't fare well in an environment that's like, we have this amazing goal. We're going to crush all of you to get to our goal together, dollars and cents wise versus world changing wise. Like either way, people aren't fulfilled from that type of work. And I think that's one of the beauties of this book. It really kind of boils down to the sense of a feeling, a very personal feeling of fulfillment, which is not a word that they use in the book, but I think comes through in the sense of flow is fulfilling, and flow is sustaining and feels sustainable to people in a way that these other sort of mentalities and, cultural norms around capitalism, for example, just aren't for folks.
No, and honestly, I will tell you that every organization where I had a team, everyone wanted my team. It had nothing to do, everything to do with my team, but nothing to do with my team. Because what I did was I cared about the welfare of each individual, whether it was business or personal. If they came in the office and were out of sync, I had to figure out what was throwing them off and how we could solve that problem. And they were called in and we talked about it. And I helped them find solutions, personal as well as business. Because if they're not at their optimum state, right, flow state, then they're not going to do the best work. And that affects me.
Absolutely. And I think there's this weird difference between like, I'm a business person or I'm a human outside of work. Like, no, you're actually just a person. Like, there's not a business self and a personal self. There's just a self, for example. So great. I love it that you paid attention to both. And that, and that's revolutionary, right? That's like unheard of in a business environment to have your team leader talk about how you are as a person or how to support you as a person, whether it's the work or the personal life, whatever that is. But supporting humans is leadership, I think. So good on you for supporting humans. Like, and how a bummer that's revolutionary.
Right. So, well, and that's just, so I'll give you two quick stories. One, I had a woman work for me who loved her job, and she came in and she was miserable. I'm like, something's going on. So I called her in and I said, listen, I'm concerned. What is wrong? What's going on? Come to find out, her and her boyfriend moved in together and they were having financial issues. So she was looking for another job because she needed more money and she didn't want to leave the job that she loved. So I offered to do their budget. Said, let me try this. And if this works, will you stay? And so she said, okay. So they came in and sure enough, there was money just like sieving through them. So I put them on a budget that gave them play money as well. And sure enough, she was coming in all happy and thrilled. This is what I mean. The personal is as important. And I became a manager with only a high school diploma. So I started going to college, right, to get my degree. And I was in the HR training, and the leader, the professor was talking about treating your people well. And we were on break, and I said, I can't believe you get paid to teach this common sense thing. And he said, people don't know this, Gail.
Oh, yeah. I'm not surprised. And
what?
And yet I'm surprised, right? Both. That's crazy.
Right? But if you're teaching it, why do they still think they have to manage people? It just blows my mind. So this revolution, this thought process. So, thank you, Internet, for opening up the possibility to have dialogues across the country, across the world, that we could not have except one-to-one before. So information wasn't flowing. Information is flowing, number one. And number two, thank you, 2020, for giving us the opportunity to sit back and consume this information and see how it fits for each individual. So consciousness is rising at a very rapid rate right now because of those two elements. And I'm thrilled to death with the changes that are coming.
I think there was definitely a big shakeup in so many people's world and lives. And I think that hopefully, I agree with you that I think that caused a lot of people to sort of step out of the day-to-day flow, the day-to-day habits that they had and look and be like, oh, wait, is this right? Is this the thing? Because before I think we get not trapped, but we get habits, we get in cycles and we're like, this is what it is. And it takes sometimes every once in a while, someone's like, hey, P.S., you're a fish in the tank.
On the wheel.
You're surrounded by water. And like, what's water? I don't even know. Because we don't know we're in the fish tank the whole time. So I think that, yeah, I agree. There's been so much perspective gained by so many folks during these huge shakeups. And some of that is like, hey, by the way, you're going to find a new job because our business just went under. But the other side is, wait, what do I want to do? What am I actually seeking and wanting to be a part of? And how can I support myself as a person and as, a human throughout whatever work I do, whatever recreation I do, the relationships I have in my life, calling all of that into question at once, I think has been a really beautiful thing for so many people.
Absolutely. And one of the things I know I discovered was my natural flow again of working. What time getting up in the morning? I mean, I'm 3:30 in the morning is a beautiful time for me to get up, right? By 7, 8 o'clock, I have done my meditation. I have had my coffee. I have done the things that I want to do, and I'm ready to work, right? Come 12, 12:30, I'm going to go and take a little 10, 20-minute cat nap, right? And then I'm ready to go again. That you cannot do in an office
Oh,
space.
if you have a literal 9 to 5,
to.
absolutely not. That's not going to work.
No. And it never really worked for me. I really struggled with those corporate hours. I have a woman who used to work for me, and her and I were talking, and I was just talking about a meeting at 3 o'clock, and she said, "Don't people know you're no good after 2:30?" Right? So she knew. So it really is very interesting, very interesting. So yes, there'll be more books about flow. There'll be more studies around flow. There'll be more people allowing themselves to let go and get into flow. You cannot train flow. You have to let go into flow.
Yeah, it's not trainable, but it's something you can access. And you can access with intention, but without forcing. So it's beautiful. I think it's this sort of classic metaphor about like the tighter you grasp, the more it slides through your fingers, right? So the idea is to approach with, the metaphorical open hand. So it can be held and supported without being grabbed and crushed. Fantastic. There's this other part from the book go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to bring up this other little piece from the book that is something I'd seen before, but came back around through this discussion of the book that I wanted to mention. And that's this Japanese term, wabi-sabi. And that means the ability to find beauty in imperfection. And I think that speaks to this openness, but also acceptance of what's happening, what's around you without... Yeah, you're cultivating, not forcing. There's still intention and there's still goals and there's still getting the work done, but there's not a sense. Flow is different than other senses of doing, like we've been talking about, doing the work, hustle, grind, those types of things.
Right. One of the things that I consciously work on is judgment. And judgment and blame, those two things, that are subconscious, like just automatically triggers, I will stop and say, okay, am I judging? Okay, ego. Then, and I'm actually going to do a little blog on this. I take that judgment and I see me putting it in the grinder in the garbage disposal, right? Oh, this is you, ego, judging. No, let's just put it right. Because when you do that, then you don't care anymore about what other people are doing. That's beautiful. That's their thing, right? And I'm going to be doing my thing, and that's fine. If our things aren't the same, who cares? Who cares, right? Just enjoy the moment and have fun. Have fun.
Right. I work with teams sometimes that are focused on literally winning if it's a sports competition. Like that's what they want to do. And there's this, usually in any group of 10, 15, 20 people, someone is like, we gotta get this task done. Let's go. Someone else is like, we are here to play and have fun and connect. And they have conflict between these two mindsets, like the go and the other mindset. And they can actually be on the team together, both feel happy and fulfilled, and be competitive and have fun all at the same time. Like it's possible to be open to that when you're not trying to force someone to be like you, or you're not expecting people to be like you, or setting up structures so everyone has to act like you, or work on your timeline, or work, be in the office from 9 to 5 versus get up at 3 and, flow through the day in a way that supports you, whatever it is. And so I think finding flow within your team means acceptance in a way too, like accepting what play looks like, because play does look different for different people. And I think there's still the sense of, those pieces of ecstasis are there, but someone finds it in crossword puzzles and you're like, here's what works for me. And someone else is like, I need to color and draw. And someone else is like, we're going to play kickball out in the parking lot. Let's go. It's just very different for people what play is and what it means. but I think you can still engage people with these different senses of play together in one space. It doesn't mean you have to do one thing different for each person. I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Ware.
Right.
Gary Ware, he wrote this book called Play Rebellion, which in a similar space is about bringing play into spaces where we don't think play should happen. Like there's this culture, this anti-play culture, and it just crushes people.
So, I had a team that I worked with, and we were in a pod. We were creating something, and we had a table in the middle, and the purpose of the table was when something came up, we could push back and have, a conference. Well, I would bring in those mind twisting toys and leave it on the table. Right. And it was awesome. Other teams would come in and go, "What did you bring in this week?" Right. And other people would be playing with it and then go back to work. Right. And come up with fantastic solutions with what was going on. Well, I play games every morning. That is one of my things that I do to kind of get into flow is, and I literally, this is crazy. I thank the universe for helping me solve the problems. Right. Thank you. I know I didn't get that by myself. You came up with that solution. Right. And so I am starting to thank the flow, my mind, body, and soul, right? My heart has to be in it. My mind has to be in it in order to allow it to flow. It's just crazy, but it works for me.
That's beautiful. That is so great. And I think that speaks to finding like the sense of what is true for you in a certain way too. Not just what works for you, but what's actually true for you. And I think that's one of the shakeup of the pandemic let people step back and be like, well, what's true for me was a question a lot of people asked through this process of having, literally the rug ripped out from under you, or metaphorically, obviously. But I think that time and that introspection is never wasted to find out what's true for you and how playing games can help and how freeing your mind can help and how freeing your process can help you get so much more done than you did before. That's fantastic. I applaud you in your willingness to go there and pursue this for yourself.
Yeah. Right. And so this book, again, so getting back to the purpose of our meeting is stealing fire is about stealing the fire from the gods, right? It's not stealing the fire. It's you are the fire. You are the God. You are the flow, right? And not really stealing it like robbing, but stealing it by honing it and using it, right? So when I think of the word steal in this context, it is allowing and using and knowing that it's who you are. You have a right to it.
Fantastic. I think we should end on that note. That's a great summary of what this book is about. It's been awesome talking with you today, Gail. Thanks so much for joining me on the Books Applied podcast.
Oh, Iggy, thank you so much. This book just, it meant so much to me, and I hope your listeners pick it up and really enjoy it as much as I did.
Absolutely. I hope so too. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Books Applied podcast. I hope you enjoyed getting to know a new book and learning how to apply its ideas to make your work, sport, or life a little bit more awesome. For more leadership education-related content, including conflict management checklists, invitations to a fun free lunch that happens monthly, upcoming classes, webinars, and mastermind groups, please head over to wslleadership.com. Thanks, and have a great day.